call the Social Services and Housing Committee to order. And the first item on the agenda is a declaration of pecuniary interest. Does anybody have one? Seeing none, we'll go to our delegation. So we have the Poverty Task Force presentation with Jill Umbach and Francesca Dobbin from United Way Grey Bruce. And so welcome. There.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Francesca and I are coming to you from the Steering Committee of the Poverty Task Force for Bruce Grey. In general, you've received our report. Now it is to the end of August. Right now, Christine is handing out a small package. Within that package is latest information, some data for you to take back. They're largely infographics, but I will refer to a few of those that you can read at your leisure after today's meeting. In general, we support a community of change that focuses on reducing poverty. By not only addressing the root causes, but we're also looking at taking action that leads to long-term change. We do that both at a policy level as well as on the ground with community-based initiatives. We work in 4 sectors. And these sectors are housing, income security, food security, and transportation. These were prioritized in the beginning in 2013 when we first came together. And in particular, because we know of Grey Bruce as a rural area, we looked at accessibility to all of these services, as well as some of the root causes for income security, food security, and any of the barriers we had to housing and transportation. Another really important part of the Poverty Task Force is that we address the stigma associated with being on low income. And in particular, we take a Bridges Out of Poverty approach, which is looking at the lack of resources, a definition of poverty being people who are under-resourced. And it's not just income, but under-resourced for other resources that we offer in the community. Our approach has been to have a very active community voices group. This is a group of people who have lived experience. Almost all of them are on Ontario Works. All of them have been through a program of Bridges Out of Poverty called Getting Ahead. And I'm really pleased to also speak as a Getting Ahead facilitator. Just recently we had graduates from Bruce County go through our Getting Ahead program from Wyerton and from Walkerton. And it was really exciting to have people from Grey and Bruce County come together. That's an 8-week course, our Getting Ahead program. And they look at their resources, they look at where they need to build their resources, they look at networking and challenges within living on low income, but also how do you get ahead in life. So very exciting this year to have both Bruce and Grey counties involved. We also do a lot of training. We've done some large Grey County and Bruce County-wide training around the Bridges Out of Poverty approach and how people can get ahead. We also continue to build partnerships with key community stakeholders. Within your package is, on the very last piece of note, is something called Talking Points for Welcoming Newcomers. As you know, refugees, Syrian refugees and non-Syrian refugees coming to our area, all our communities are actively involved in that. Most recently, our discussions have been on how do we provide services for people on low income as well as provide services for newcomers, refugees coming into our area. So we put together some talking points and primarily putting to our policymakers as well as to our members around the table to say, this is an opportunity for us to look at what do we need to put in place for newcomers, but also how do we expand and build on services for people on low income in our area. Within the Poverty Task Force, we have subdivisions, as I mentioned already. We call them action groups, which focus on transportation, housing, income, and food security. And in particular, I wanted to highlight today a few of our projects. In the package we have given to you, one of the projects is the Bruce Grey Food Charter. Now this food charter, it's a 4- or 5-page colored document, and it looks at food security issues across Grey Bruce. And this is a charter which was developed after a full year of consultation. We went out and met with everybody from food producers to Bruce Agricultural Association, as well as people working in the area of providing services for food, the food banks, etc. And this is a vision that we have for moving forward. This food charter has been endorsed already by several lower tier municipalities, as well as Grey County, and we'll be moving into Bruce County this 2016, and really going in and engaging and talking with community members, as well as looking for lower tier municipality support and back up to the council as well. New endorsements have also come from not only just policymakers, but we've also been engaging with businesses. The Owen Sound Downtown Area Improvement has endorsed, and so we have quite a few people looking at this document. The Food Security Action Group has looked at this as a policy overarching document, but then we also have other projects that are more directly involved with lower communities. Another policy approach that we're looking at is our above standard housing project. This particular housing project looks at not just how do we improve housing in our area, and we're largely looking at rental and affordable housing, but it also looks at the relationship between tenants and people on low income. This past year we have been interviewing initially people on low income to say what are the challenges with the rental properties and or social housing, and that varies all across Grey Bruce in terms of the quality, the safety and affordability of our housing. It looks at the wait lists and who is trying to get into housing, in particular accessibility. Then we talk to the bylaw enforcement officers and the people that are responsible for looking at the standard of housing and how we enforce that throughout Grey and Bruce counties. And then the third stakeholder involved in that is meeting with landlords. And we are very well situated to engage with a lot of the business development people. We've taken advantage of the YIMBY group, which has some very prominent business people on it, to engage with them to say, what do we really vision for affordable and safe housing? And then we've also talked to the smaller landlords, the ones that have housing that is, you know, I've got an extra house, it was my mother's house, I'm now renting it out, I don't have a lot of capital to invest in this house, but I can do some low income housing. So we've been talking to the very smaller individual landlords and then also the larger business developers. This particular project is coming out of our Housing Action Group to look at not only best practice of engaging with bylaw enforcement, tenants and landlords, but it also looks at the provincial policies around standards of housing. So we have funding from a Rent Safe for engagement at a provincial level. So that's another way where the Poverty Task Force is engaging. 2 members of our Community Voices and a prominent member of our YIMBY have gone forward to Toronto recently and been engaged on above standard housing practices in all of Ontario. So as much as possible, the task force engages at the provincial level as well as at our municipal and county levels. The food security aspect, as I said, we were looking at the charter as a way of an overview, an oversight, and a general policy and approach towards food security. And it touches on everything from land use to access to grocery stores to healthy local food and economic development. But what we did also look at is the access to local fresh food. And one of our challenges in our area is that we have a lot of food producers. we don't do a lot of affordable recirculation of their food to low-income communities and or to low-income marketplaces. So what we are looking at right now, we have just this month started a food mapping inventory where we're actually reaching out to partners and identifying if they have food that may be available locally to be redistributed to the food banks. We already have this in an ad hoc, but what we want to look at it is developing a gleaning project whereby in Meaford, for example, we know there's a lot of apple orchards that are no longer being commercially run, but we have those apples being grown. We have volunteers with the local food bank that will go and pick those apples. We have community volunteers that will then translate them into jams and jellies and other produce that can then have a longer shelf life and can be distributed through the food banks. We have examples with that happening in many communities around Grey Bruce, and we want to capitalize on that in a more formal partnership and engage to have more fresh and affordable food going either into the food banks or coming into community centers. In Meaford, for example, they have people on low income doing the picking, and you get to keep 50% for your family, and 50% goes to the food bank. So we're looking at some of the best practices of what we have here and going forward. So right now in January, February, we'll be doing a mapping. Part of that mapping exercise is really just going out and shaking hands with the people that are already doing some fantastic work. So what we do at the task force is to try and reach across Grey Bruce, see where the best models are happening, see where the fantastic community initiative is, and say, can we replicate that elsewhere? Can we build upon that? So that's a large part of what we're doing. Income security projects that we have are largely looking at two aspects. We did spend an intensive amount of time last year looking at the living wage. And within your package is the calculation that's been done by the United Way. What is the living wage? What is also the cost of living? A couple of the things that I've attached there. What does it cost to live in Grey Bruce? What's the cost of housing in Kincardine or Saugeen Shores? And how does that balance against if you're on social assistance? So how much money do you have after you pay your rent to go towards food? Or how much money do you have to be able to do sports with your kids when you've already maxed out everything towards rent or towards food? And that's another aspect of the food security, is not having enough to get to the end of the month to be able to pay for good, nutritious food. So our income security looks at how do we increase money in people's pockets. One of them is to address the issue around precarious work. The fact that we have a significant increase in part-time jobs that don't pay benefits, and families are not able to earn enough income to cover all their costs, to pay for rent and food. The other thing is to look at small little things, such as recently we were looking at income tax clinics. The fact that if you don't file your income tax, you will not get a lot of the benefits that the Ontario government gives you. But for a lot of people, they can't afford to pay the income tax. They don't see where the benefits are because they haven't really looked at it and been educated on these are benefits you're missing out on. So how do we work with people across Grey Bruce, not just at tax time, but throughout the year? A lot of people have to file their income tax in order to access services in Grey Bruce. And so how do we do that in a way that's affordable? You can no longer file your income tax same day and get the cash back in the new system. So we found that there's a significant increase of number of people who don't file because they don't have the money to pay up front. So we're looking at alternative services. There's a new regulation that's just come out recently. Well, I should say, there's a new proposal for new legislation that's come out recently. It's in your package with regards to debt collection and payday loans. One of the things we do in our Getting Ahead program is we analyze with people on low income, what are some of the predators we have in our community? What are some of the people that come in and, you know, an easy home will come in and offer you a great deal, and you end up paying sometimes up to 400% on a futon. And I've got somebody who, $500 futon ended up paying $2,000 for it after the interest was calculated. We have a lot of slippery slopes around how much you pay to cash at a cash mart, a check because you don't have a bank account and things aren't set up properly, or you don't have a credit card, and therefore to get credit, you go to a lot of these places. You need to furnish your home. A lot of people we find on low income are challenged. If you don't have your house or your apartment set up in such a way that CAS is happy with you, with Children's Aid, we know there's a risk there that your children may be apprehended. So we've heard the stories from our people on low income that they need to have a nice house. They need to have a nice rental property to be able to maintain their lifestyle, but also sometimes maintain their family. So our income security in July this year, we actually met with the ministry. It's the government, Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And we discussed, they actually had put out a call for consultations, and they weren't coming to our area. So we called them up and said, we'd like to have you up here. And the people at the table were our Income Security Action Group members, but also our community voices. And it was the first time in all of their consultations throughout Ontario that they met with anybody on low income. And boy, they were shocked. We set up a 2-hour meeting consult that came, and they had all the groups set up, and we said, forget that. And we pulled the tables together, and we just talked. And people told real-life stories. People talked about being jailed for not paying their debts. And they were shocked. They didn't know that anybody still got jailed, that there was a debtor's jail that happens in our area. People talked about the interest rates they were paying on an easy home loan. People talked about debt collectors and how they call all through the night, and people are totally stressed out by this. And it's third-party debt collectors, which we have no regulation over. We have regulation over the Leons and the Brick and the places that might come after you for a first-party lending. But somebody buys that debt, and there's no regulation to monitor those people, and they can call you anytime. They also don't have to tell you what the debt is and who they're calling on behalf of. They can just chase you down and harass you. So we heard stories, reality check for the policy people. And they were shocked. It was the first time. They had met with a lot of poverty task force, but no one had come with lived experience and told real stories. So that's what we do a lot too. Our community voices have been meeting with a lot of politicians. We had Larry Miller for a couple of hours to talk about housing issues and a national poverty reduction strategy. We've had our MPPs come and talk about access to transportation and health care and a range of things. So our community voices, part of their empowerment is to feel like they can sit at the table and they can talk with you or with anybody else with authority and with an understanding of what it's like to be on low income and try to get by in our communities. So that's a large part of what we do. This is just a quick list of some of the papers that are with you. A little bit, the first one on the Poverty Task Force structure and a little bit around some stats on food security. As I said, the Bruce Grey Food Charter. What does it cost to live in Grey Bruce? The Nutritious Food Survey, just giving a little bit of details about the health units analysis. Welcoming newcomers, and that proposal changes to payday loans. Where can you find us? We've submitted reports and will continue to submit reports to the council, but you can also, we have monthly action group meetings. Our Community Voices meets monthly. We have bi-monthly Poverty Task as a whole meetings, and we go between Port Elgin and Owen Sound, and you are always welcome to attend. We've got a website, a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and an email. So there's our contact information. So thank you very much for your time. And questions?
Does anybody have any questions for the ladies? This was a great presentation, very concise, good overall picture, but maybe somebody has some more questions on some details. Janice?
Thank you for coming. My question is pertaining to the poverty level. So you mentioned that the definition of being below the poverty line is simply being under-resourced? Is that what's happening today? You're using that terminology? Because I'm kind of looking for an average household income, because it's kind of hard to talk about, you know, in your municipality, how many people are living below the poverty line when we don't really have any measuring stick for that, other than to say you're just simply under-resourced, because that's quite a big...
There are statistics, and statistics. So we look at the under-resourced piece because we're a rural community. When you're looking for the absolute poverty line, the province has adopted and had adopted LICO, but is leaning more to a LIM. So LICO is low-income cutoff, and the LIM is the low-income measure. And the low-income measure looks more as to what it is, the whole cost to live. So it's rent, food, transportation, whereas the low-income cutoff is a statistic on the number of people above a line and below a line, and I am not the data person. So we look to the LIM. The LIM is what the Ontario Energy Board uses around the utility assistance programs. So what we're looking at in terms of that is 28,000 for two, 32 for four, a family of four, and then it moves from there. But it's, again, it depends on what your resources are. You know, if you live in a fairly urban, dense center and you can get around and there's transportation and you don't have to have a car to work, then you're much able to more to cope. So it's a moving target. Okay.
Anybody else? Christine.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Jill and Francesca for coming and just remind the committee as well that are involved in the committee. I myself sit on the steering committee level, and then on the various projects and action groups. Some of our other staff are involved in those projects as well too. And there has been really good alignment between our strategic values around shared services and coordinating, working with other agencies. That's allowed us to happen through the Poverty Task Force. So that's been really helpful for us. And as you're aware, we have in 2015 funded the work of the Poverty Task Force as well through our Strategic Community Fund. So again, I want to thank Jill and Francesca for coming and giving us the update. And we look forward to working together throughout 2016 as well too.
And we just, anybody, we meet alternatively in Owen Sound and Port Elgin, and you're more than welcome to find out when the next meeting is and join us and see what we're up to. It's a going concern.
So, sorry, Madam Chair, may I just ask one question for clarity?
I think so.
Just, if I understand correctly, Jill, when you were speaking, you had suggested that as a result of the SAMS program, we had a number of people who did not file their income tax last year, or did I misunderstand?
Not the result of SAMS. No.
So what was the change that drove that, and how was the data?
The change was in the way that the government distributes benefits. So that you get your child tax benefit now instead of getting lump sum payments from the government, when you file your tax return, a lot of those payments now are put out through the year. And initially, my understanding, and I'll be corrected, is that if initially we actually lobbied for that. A lot of the Poverty Task Force and poverty advocates lobbied because people were spending that lump sum that used to come. So at tax time, you used to get a couple $1,000s, and it was the perfect time to go out and get the new TV and all of those things. Snow tires, important things. Or it was something where that's when you got your winter coats or whatever. So it was a lump sum payment that we used to get right back in April. And out of that lump sum, the professional tax services, you could then pay them that $50 for your taxes right away out of that lump sum. So they would wait that 1 or 2 days to get your return, and then you could pay them. Now what's happening is you're actually getting it in direct deposits over a quarterly basis. So you're not getting the lump sum payments out anymore.
Okay, so
it's got nothing to do with SAMS.
Okay, so just for clarity, I believe the comment was that as a result of that change, people are not filing their income tax. And so how do we know that, and what kind of numbers are we talking about where people are not filing their income tax?
Yeah, you can do that one.
Okay, this was actually brought to our attention, we're tag teaming this one, because with the Ontario Energy Board has a new Ontario Energy Savings Plan, and if you don't know about the OESP, Google OESP, because your community and your seniors need to know about it. as part of that presentation, to be eligible for that, you need to be, have filed your taxes. That's their hope. Otherwise, you have to meet with an agency, and we verify income manually, and that's expensive for the Ontario Energy Board because they pay us to do that. So the OEB came out and said that they estimated 25% of Ontarians had not filed taxes, which was a statistic that was pretty alarming to us. So that's when our income security group, in light of that, started looking into this issue. We actually met with one of the for-profit, and I don't mean that in a negative way, that's just who they are, it's their business, tax filers, to see what the changes were and what had happened, that we were now seeing less and less people filing their taxes. And basically, they said to us, and this was back in December, they had 300 files in a drawer that until the $75 or $100 was paid up front, they would not push send on the e-filing, because that's their business. And if they file the taxes, you know, nothing motivates someone to come in and pay the bill, and then they've got bad debt. You know, there's no judgment there, that's the business model. So we were trying to look at what it is that we can do to get ahead of this issue, encourage people. We see so many people, especially on Ontario Works, who aren't getting that child tax benefit, which was put in place to lift people out of poverty, especially families with children. You get whatever you get the first of the month, be it CPP, ODSP, Ontario Works. The 10th is the Ontario Trillium benefit, the 20th is the child tax credit. And yeah, we were the agencies that were screaming 5 years ago, we need more money throughout the month instead of all at the beginning of the month. And they went and they did this. And then we went, oh, but that then wrecks something over here, and now we've got this problem. So that's how we're doing with the income tax clinic. So we're looking at strengthening the volunteer sector that does it. We have people with 4 or 5 years worth to file. One of the best things we found out, though, was you can file 2000 and, well, now it'd be 15, without having filed 14, 13, 12, 10. You can file the most recent. You don't have to go back to the beginning. So what we can do is get them filing that 1 year, that starts the funds flowing, and then we can work on the other years as well. So that's how we look at all these issues in the systems.
Christine?
Thank you. Also just wanted to update, I've just recently received a communication through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that the Ministry of Finance is aware of the issue of people lacking in filing their taxes, and they're going to be pushing an education campaign. So the inquiry that I received is, how many posters and pamphlets could we use to put out into our social housing communities and whatnot. So once we receive that campaign, we'll be able to share that broadly in the community through the library systems as well, so that people are aware of the benefits of filing.
Yeah, that's what we needed, posters. The federal government provides no funding for the volunteer income tax clinics. They provide the software and the training, and the rest comes out of the community, which has been part of the challenge with that system. And we've pushed back and said, like paper, pens, time, computers, printers. Oh, just go to the community.
And I think the other challenge is that we do get that outpouring of support at tax time, but we don't always have the volunteers throughout the year. Or we have people that will, do it on the side, but don't want to be advertised, so we can't make official referrals. So that's why we're looking at that as one micro aspect in trying to increase income in the household.
Are there any other comments or questions? So thank you very much for your presentation and for your work and leadership in this area. It's always fraught with problems, and like you say, one solution impacts something else, and it's good for us to have this information and do our best. It's very seldom people get through life, any of us, without a hand up somewhere along the line, and it's just some of us are more fortunate to be born into families that can give us a good hand up, and others aren't. So thank you very much. So next we have the action item, the Westerio OESP and LEAP report, which is attached, and I'll just turn it over to Christine.
Thank you. I have a recommendation before you to introduce a bylaw that will authorize us to execute the service agreement with West Ontario Power so that we can begin to formally act as the agency for the OASP and LEAP programs. And I can take any questions if there are any.
Does anybody, Milt? Oh, you're going to move it? I guess no questions. Second by Robert. And that the recommendation that a bylaw be introduced authorizing the warden and clerk to execute a service agreement between West Power and the County of Bruce for the provision of the OESP and LEAP assistant agreement, and that the county shall continue to provide this assistance for a term of 4 years. Any other discussion? All in favor? And that carried. Our next meeting is February the 4th, 2016, and I need a motion, movers to adjourn. Moved by Janice, second by Wilf, that we adjourn the Social Services and Housing Committee. Thank you.